Just making sure the recording's working. There we go. Welcome to Dr. Yun for joining us today, WVAR's member update. I wanted to give the members who are watching with us just a brief background of Dr. Yun. I will say I'm just gonna out myself as a huge fan. So if it seems like I'm a little enthusiastic, it's because I am. And I want to say thank you first to Angela Mayfield and the folks in Charleston who helped to get Dr. Yun with us today. Dr. Yun is the Chief Economist and Senior Vice President of Research for the National Association of Realtors. In that role, he oversees and is responsible for a wide range of research activity for the association, including NAR's existing home sales statistics, affordability index, and the home buyers and sellers profile report, which Dr. Yun, I will tell you, we use in almost all of our trainings here in West Virginia. So thank you for your work on that. Dr. Yun received his undergraduate degree from Purdue University and earned his PhD from our neighbor, University of Maryland at College Park. So with that, Dr. Yun, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Amy, for the introduction and inviting. And I want to thank Angela Mayfield also, because I met her at one of the NAR meetings, and she said, please come over to West Virginia. And I actually enjoy visiting in a wild and wonderful West Virginia. But because of COVID, we are doing this virtual meeting. Hello, everyone. I hope you are all safe and staying busy because the real estate has been quite a surprise in 2020. If we remember back in March of this year, and it was mid-March, because I was anticipating for March Madness college basketball tournament, but it did not occur. So that is my timeline as to when we had the lockdown. And it was quite scary on two fronts. One, on the virus, because we saw the TV images coming from China and then to European countries where you had many people dying, and even medical doctors actually dying from COVID. So we really did not know that if we touch a doorknob and accidentally touch our face, is it a death sentence? Now we know a little more, social distancing measures, masks. So I hope everyone can practice those measures. And the second scary point was, with the lockdown, who is able to buy a home in such a condition? How is your commission income going to flow? Because realtors have their own personal mortgages and other financial obligations. So quite scary time. But we are here in mid-October and things are more settled. Certainly real estate has surprised for the better. Back in March, I got many interviews from reporters, many real estate industry players about, are we going to face another foreclosure crisis as happened 10 years ago? And I thought that, well, the fundamental conditions were different. We don't have oversupply, so you will hold the home prices more stable. And second, we didn't have those funny mortgages, subprime lending mortgages. So I thought we would not see any implosion in mortgages. So home prices, my forecast back in March was stable conditions. I did not anticipate the prices would be rising this fast and home sales actually outpacing what happened last year. So quite a surprise and for the better. Let me put up my PowerPoint because as an economist, I speak better with the slides. So bear with me, hold 1 second as I upload this onto the screen. So go to the front page. Okay. There we go. All right. So let's see what we can see, track. Let me first start with non-economic data that is not West Virginia. Utah and New York, because these are two most contrasting states related to this data point, which is a GPS mobility. Everyone has a cell phone, and if we are staying at home, it shows no mobility, but if we are going out and about town, it shows some mobility. So what this chart shows is that before the pandemic, zero reference line, and then we had a lockdown. In New York, Governor Cuomo said he wants to vanquish the virus, so he had a lockdown that was much more strict and for longer period, and hence you see less mobility in New York. While in Utah, the governor was much more relaxed, reopened the economy sooner, and you see a little more mobility. What do we see regarding virus? I think in Utah, they are hitting highs in terms of new cases of virus, while in New York, it appears to be contained. So in that sense, you may say, well, New York policy may be better. But I want to illustrate that that is not the end of the story, because the lockdown is really leading to fewer economic activity, and you clearly see it in the unemployment chart. New York unemployment rate is much higher than in Utah. Utah governor, in essence, said we need to get the economy going and hopefully people stay safe. Now, the number of new cases, given the medical advances, the death rate is much lower. But this is a tough trade-off I think every governor faces regarding trying to contain the virus versus trying to get the economy going. Let me illustrate where West Virginia stands. So West Virginia, you see that the unemployment rate of 8.6% is above national average, just modestly above national average. So there was some level of I guess, stricter lockdown, or some of the industry is having a hard time coming back. Given that natural gas prices are much lower, the coal industry is still suffering. So the coal industry is not coming around, given that people are switching over to natural gas. So you see a large variation across the US. One of the interesting point is this map, back in February, before the pandemic, all 50 states had low unemployment rate, very similar numbers, but things began to diverge currently as to what's happening. Now, if we look at another way to view it is the actual job situation. How much job losses from the pandemic? And you can see in Utah, way out in the western state, their job situation is only 1% down from 1 year ago. West Virginia, it is down 6% from 1 year ago, while in New York, it is down 11% from 1 year ago. So again, large variation in the job market condition. If we look at the national job number over the past 20 years, it looks like the following. The middle of the chart shows the subprime loan-led boom and job creation. And we know those were funny mortgages ready to implode because it overstretched the people's budget. So we saw the foreclosure and job cuts right in the middle of the chart. But from the low point, America experienced the longest economic expansion ever, 10 straight years of job creation. And that is why you saw the home buyers steadily coming in, over the past few years. And so longest job expansion ever. But in a single month of April, we lost all that jobs. 10 years of job creation gone in a single month. More recent months data, you see some jobs recovery as restaurants are beginning to open. People are going out and about a little more carefully, but we are not back to normal by any sense. We need another 10 million job creation just to get us back to normal. Let's look at West Virginia now. This is the picture for West Virginia, which is somewhat different from the US. First, in the middle of the chart, you really did not encounter the massive foreclosure crisis that the rest of the country experienced. So let me go back to the US chart. So the red line is year 2000 as a reference point. So if you look at the US, you see that situation in the US, and the middle of the chart, essentially going back down. But in West Virginia, you really never went down that significantly. And the job situation had been fairly steady, even though rest of the country was creating jobs. And I know there's some restructuring going on in the coal mining industry, but overall, the situation was modestly better in terms of jobs in West Virginia compared to year 2000, right before the pandemic. And then pandemic hit, and you see how far you went down. And then in recent months, some job creation that's occurring, but still below what it was in the year 2000. Job losses are principally occurring in the hotel industry as people are not traveling, the restaurant business, and in the retail sector. home construction jobs are holding on reasonably well. And the office employment, finance and insurance, they're actually gaining jobs. So what is interesting in this recession that we have is that job losses are primarily occurring in the low-wage industries, leisure, hospitality, retail, while the higher paying jobs like construction and financial activity is reasonably holding on. And one of the things that I think that could occur is people who lost jobs in restaurant or the retail sector, maybe they could get some vocational training to go into construction. First, we need more workers in construction because we have a housing shortage. And second, it pays more. So maybe switching some people who lost job into construction would be a possible win-win situation, bringing workers into an industry where we desperately need more workers. And second, it pays more. Now, the personal income for the country during the months of pandemic actually grew faster than on the normal years. Normally, family income would rise 3-4% each year. But during the pandemic, it actually grew. And you have to scratch your head and say, what is going on? And the answer is massive stimulus, $1,200 check, the unemployment check that was enhanced. Someone who was working at a department store who lost a job, receiving unemployment check now, what do you know? The unemployment check is actually higher than the wages they were receiving. In addition, small business administration loans, which often, if you meet certain criteria, you don't have to repay. So large income support due to the massive stimulus bill package. Now, there is currently some debate between Speaker Nancy Pelosi and President Trump about the next stimulus bill. President Trump wants to get the money out there quickly. Nancy Pelosi also wants to get the money out there quickly, but she also wants some additional help for state and local government because you saw on the chart like California and New York, they have high unemployment rate. And President Trump is saying essentially, well, no, those states need to reopen its economy rather than seeking government help. So those are some sticking points, but hopefully there is a passage quickly because many Americans still need some income support. Related to consumer spending, consumers are still down in terms of spending patterns from 1 year ago. So even though the incomes are higher, spending is down because people don't want to go to restaurants, they cannot go see sports game in person. So overall spending activity is down. If we look at specific categories as where people are spending and not spending, it shows that people are spending more at the beer, wine, liquor stores. Are people trying to drown out their sorrows? And the answer is, well, they cannot drink at the bar and the restaurant, so they're drinking more at home. Online shopping, no surprise, it is up. Maybe you did not know that it was up 20%. Building material and gardening, spending up. Home Depot CEO has indicated their revenue growth is amazing. He never thought that it would grow this fast because people are at home and they're doing more home remodeling and gardening work. People are at home and they are bored, so they're doing sporting good, maybe bicycle. I guess in West Virginia, maybe rifles for hunting activities or video games, so that is up. While spending at the gas station is down, restaurant spending is down. If people do not have to go to offices frequently, they don't need new clothes, so it is down. And any tourism-related industry really down in the souvenir and the gifts situation. What about paying for apartments? Back in 2019, when the economy was good, 90% of tenants were paying rents on time. In the pandemic months, it is 88%, and apartment owners are quite pleased. They thought it would be down dramatically, but is reasonably holding on. Part of that reason is that enhanced unemployment insurance, so that is helping. And let's see what happens in the November, December, because currently as it stands, the unemployment check is much lower than in summer months. So unless another stimulus package is passed, there could be some droppage in the rent payments. Now, President Trump wants to say we cannot provide so generous amount or no one will return to work. So he wants to provide some level of incentive to return to work. And if they have a job, they can pay rent. Nancy Pelosi is saying, well, we need to continue to provide generous amount so they can pay rent and they can buy food. So another sticking point as to the next stimulus package, which they are still negotiating. Now let's turn to the good news. Home sales is one positive sector of the economy. Home sales, recent months, above 1 year ago. 2019 was a good year, and 2020 in recent months is actually doing better than 2019. People want to take advantage of the record low mortgage rates. Newly constructed home sales, up 44%. So home builders are in essence saying you build it, they don't have any problem finding a buyer. So we need to build more homes given such a strong demand for new home sales. Pending contracts, it is record high, which means that this autumn home sale season will be one of the best ever, if not the best autumn ever, based on the pending contracts. Even better news. What do realtors say to their clients about demonstrating seriousness? Get a mortgage. So what are consumers doing? They are applying for mortgages and it is up 20%, 30% above 1 year ago, depending upon which weeks you are looking at. So very strong number of potential buyers in the pipeline, ready to hit the market. This winter will be one of the best winter season ever. Now, I know the winter months is much slower than the summer, so you have to compare winter months with other winter months, and this winter could be one of the best ever based on the potential number of people who took out mortgages. But one constraining factor is lack of inventory. There was shortage of inventory last year, and it is even fewer homes available for sale this year. So we need to produce more homes, those new empty homes coming onto the market, and sometimes there's a trade-up buyers buying those newly constructed homes. And that means that existing homes can then be released onto the market, that chain reaction. So we need to build more homes so we can have that cascading effect of more inventory of existing homes. Because with such a shortage of supply, multiple offers are becoming very common, and a multiple offer by definition means one winner and multiple losers. And the losers have to start over all over again, which is a big headache in that process. So to get a balanced market, we need more inventory, we need more home construction. Trend that we are observing during the pandemic, people wanting to buy out in the suburbs, rural areas, and in small towns, away from city centers, and also recreational areas should be less than 10%, but now showing 13%. So why is this happening? When I speak with realtors, some realtors indicate that they are uncomfortable. Realtors mention what the clients are saying. So the clients were saying that they feel uncomfortable about some of the social unrest that has turned violent. Now, related to the social unrest, to say that every American should be treated with human dignity, I think those are right issues to be raised. And most Americans supports that view that every Americans, including Black Americans, should be treated with human dignity. So everyone supports that. But people simply don't like violence. They don't like looting, rioting, and hence some people are choosing to go into safer neighborhood, which they perceive to be suburbs. But the biggest reason as to why this is occurring, based on what the realtors are telling me, is work from home phenomena. Even after the vaccine is discovered, work from home could be one of the permanent features of the new economy. Many technology companies have essentially said you can work from home forever, like Twitter, Facebook, I believe half of their employees can work from home forever. So if that's the case, why live in those small size homes in San Francisco paying $1 million when one can have a mansion in West Virginia? One can see similarly, say in Washington, D.C., you see a strong activity in Shepherdtown because it's within a reasonable distance to D.C., but they said, well, if I have to go to D.C. not 5 days a week, but only 2 days a week and other 3 days work from home, people may say, I want to live in a smaller town where I can buy larger size home at more affordable prices. So West Virginia, I think, will benefit from this trend. I mean, whether from person from even far away as Chicago or New York, if they don't have to be in office downtown every single day, you may begin to see some people begin to relocate even to West Virginia. So a trend that will likely benefit West Virginia over time. Vacation homes are also rising, and I know there are many good vacation locations in West Virginia. If you can work from home, why not work from vacation home? So this trend of more vacation home sales compared to primary home sales will also, I think, overall benefit West Virginia over time. So this trend of going away from city centers, I would characterize in 3 waves. The first wave occurred in the 1950s. This is when many middle-class Americans had automobile for the very first time. They could drive. They were excited, and they said, Yahoo, I can now live in the suburbs. But we have to remember that in the southern state, they had Jim Crow laws, but in the northern states, many subdivisions had a covenant to say you cannot sell a home to Black Americans. So many African Americans were denied that opportunity and hence denied the opportunity to build wealth from that ownership. The second wave occurred during the crime wave. A lot of crime in Washington, D.C., Chicago, New York. People say, no, I'm seeking safe neighborhood. So we have to contain crime to assure that we have a safe neighborhood and say a vibrant real estate market. The third wave, which is current, I characterize as work from home phenomena, the new economy. Let's remember that there are more minorities already living in the suburbs. Everyone wants a better life, safe neighborhoods. So more Asian Americans, Hispanic, African Americans living in the suburbs even before the pandemic. But given this trend from work from home, you may even see even larger number of minorities seeking homes out in the suburbs. We all study the fair housing law, part of the Realtor Code of Ethics, but it's the law of the land. If you don't practice it, you could possibly lose your license. But we all know what to do. We want to provide the best opportunity for all Americans. So let's assure that fair housing laws are fairly applied at all times. So my final slide is that housing market, we missed the spring buying season this year because of the pandemic, but the second half is so strong that the home sales in 2020 may actually surpass 2019. Home prices rising because of housing shortage. And then as we look into 2021, home prices will continue to increase, but it would depend upon how much new supply we get. And the home sales, aside from low interest rate next year, jobs recovery continuing next year, we will have second order housing demand. These are where homeowners, using Washington, D.C. as an example, or Fairfax County, Virginia, some homeowners were already happy before the pandemic. They were satisfied with their 4-bedroom house. Now they suddenly say, the 4-bedroom home is insufficient. I need a 5th bedroom and 6th bedroom to turn it into office for myself and for my spouse. So this new housing demand from work from home, I think will elevate to another second order housing demand in 2021 and beyond. So you are in a good position. Real estate is one bright spot of the economy, and things are really looking good. So thank you for inviting to share some of my thoughts with the great realtors of West Virginia. And now I want to turn it back over to Amy. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yun. I'm going to give Ray, I know Ray Joseph, our executive officer for the State Association, our CEO, has some questions for you. So while he gets back on screen, I want to say all of those things are comforting to those of us in West Virginia. We're happy to hear that we're in a good spot. I think we're seeing that across the state. Our anecdotals from our members are that, people are moving here because they don't have to work in offices anymore, and we have all the things to offer. So I'm glad to hear that. Mr. Joseph, I'll turn it over to you.
I didn't know I had any questions, but I think I could probably come up with a couple. Thank you very much, Dr. Yun, for joining us. We're very appreciative of you taking the time to update us. One of the questions that I hear all the time as I travel around the state is West Virginia is not the exception to the rule right now. We're experiencing the same excitement and boom and inventory shortages as everyone else. But obviously the big question is, at some point, that's going to stop. Do you have any trending predictions about when it's going to slow down? And the second question is also, as we talk about more people working from home, more people needing that bigger home to have that office space, obviously that's going to create a commercial space issue as more and more commercial space is freed up, rental space, lease space, with no one there to fill it. So that's a couple of things that I'd like you to address.
So first, related to when the housing market boom would stop, is when interest rate begins to rise. Now, Federal Reserve has indicated that they want to pursue this maximum liquidity policy for the next 3 or 4 years, meaning low interest rate environment. However, the Fed intention may not be the actual reality. The reality is that if we have some inflation picking up, because we're printing so much money as part of the stimulus measure, printing so much money, that printing of the money leads to higher inflation. We have to look at 1970s. When we had high inflation, we had high interest rates. Why? Lenders say, well, the money that I lend to you, when it's returned, it would have lost value. And only way to compensate that is by charging higher interest rate. So higher inflation and consequently higher interest rate, I do see it appearing, say, 2-3 years from now, but only in a modest way, not in any alarming way. So that will begin to halt some of the housing demand. People who own land from the commercial real estate, I think they're in good position because, turning raw land into developable lots, there's a great opportunity there. But the traditional commercial real estate, office, hurting, retail shop, hurting. And people need to think about how to repurpose some of this transition in the commercial real estate. So related to office, one maybe, silver lining is we didn't have over construction. So we didn't have oversupply to begin with, but it will still be the case that demand for office space will simply not be there for the next couple of years. Maybe some suburban offices will, the demand will arise as some of the companies provide some satellite offices. Now for, my office is in DC. DC downtown is dead. If one owns a restaurant in the DC downtown, lunch counters, pretty much will have to declare bankruptcy. It's going to be hard condition. But some restaurant opening in the suburbs could happen because as people are living in the suburbs, people say, well, not many people want to make peanut butter and jelly sandwich at home all the time. They want to just go to the restaurants nearby. So I think the suburb restaurant potential is also there. But the industrial warehouse, that is solid because people are doing online shopping and companies like Amazon is saying we need more warehouses, more distribution centers.
Well, let me follow up on that, Dr. Yun, because we're seeing that same thing even in West Virginia, even in rural parts of the state where less commercial, more residential. But that leads me to my other question, which is how do we pay this bill? Because while the stimulus package was a great one and it certainly benefited lots of our buyers, as a small business owner, as a taxpayer, I think we all feel that at some point that huge debt is going to have to be recovered. And I'm curious what the conversations are in your world and in the DC environment as to how that's going to happen.
So the economy collapsed back in March, April. And bipartisan is a dirty word in Washington, D.C., but back then there was a bipartisan stimulus measure, again, the stimulus check. And the idea behind that was to say, let's fix the economy and prevent a total collapse in the economy and worry about budget deficit later. But you raise a very good question. Budget deficit has to be addressed later. And how do we address it? Is it through tax increases? Can it occur through faster economic growth? But the debt level is rising and rising. And part of the financing is we are simply printing the money. To put it short, what's happening is that unemployment check that people are receiving, those are printed money in essence. So, at some point, if we print a lot of money, something bad, things like inflation could occur.
I think that's all of our fears. So I do just have a couple comments here from the Q&A section. Lots of thank yous, Dr. Yun. So Ray and I are being echoed by our members. Thank you. Enjoy hearing you speak at every opportunity. And thank you again to Angela for helping to make this happen, for sure. So lots of thank yous from everybody as I read through them. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I want to extend another invitation. I know Angela did the first one. Please consider coming to visit us again when we can all be together. As so many states, we canceled or postponed our convention this year out of security and safety issues for everybody. So when we do have one again, we absolutely extend an invitation to you to come and join with us and meet our members, because West Virginia is a beautiful state, but it is made up of wonderful people who would love to meet with you and have a chance to thank you for the work that you do. Ray, do you have any other comments before we let Dr. Young get back to his schedule?
No, I echo everybody else's comments. Thank you very much. We appreciate your taking the time to be with us. I will tell you too, in your early comments, that's been one of the advantages of the West Virginia real estate market, not just now, but even back in the 2005, 26, or 2005, 2006, sorry, boom bust, is that when you sit in an economy like West Virginia and in the housing market, and it's you don't really experience that boom like everybody else. Well, the positive consequence of that is you also don't experience the bust when it happens. And so our market has we've been very blessed over the last 2 decades at least with a fairly slow but steady rise, and you'll see that peak when everybody else peaks. But when the bust happens, usually when we track our charts, it just kind of goes where it would have been without the peak. It just sort of drops back to that level and declines. So the advantage of not really having to experience a boom is you don't have to face the bust either. And so we've had a very strong real estate economy in West Virginia. It accounts for about, well, because I use your stats in the economic impact studies you do, about 15% of our gross state product is real estate, which for a state that is mostly an extractive-based economy, 15% for any one industry is pretty serious and pretty impressive. So I think Amy, Jeff has his hand up. He may have a question.
Let me see if I can pull him over. Jeff, I can't. There you go. Dr. Young, while Jeff is getting his camera on, I'll introduce Jeff. He is the current, the 2020 WVAR president. So Jeff, like a lot of presidents across the country, had a bit of an odd year. So Jeff, if you are unmuted, you should be able to talk.
I believe I'm unmuted. No, I would just like to also.
Oh, I think we lost Jeff for a second there. Jeff, you there?
No, I think he completely vanished.
Oh, well, we lost him. Maybe he'll pop back in.
What do you
here
think?
He comes.
I was going to mention too, Doctor, that since we just witnessed it for a second live, one of the things that we've experienced in West Virginia because of our small population is the more we're forced to work at home, the more we discover how awful our broadband is, and it's because our population is so small. There's not really a bunch of aggregators and providers that are standing in line to create competition and do business in West Virginia. Have you seen that anywhere else as an issue? As we move more towards this, obviously we have to have the infrastructure to support it. And West Virginia was one of those states where in many areas we don't.
Oh, well, one of the NAR policy goals, as the infrastructure spending, it will occur at some time in 2021, but one big highlighted issue is we want broader access of rural broadband access. In fact, the pandemic, if it had occurred 5 years ago, I think the US economy would have been crushed because we would not be able to do this type of Zoom meetings. But fortunately, the broadband was available in many metro markets, but not extensively across the country in the small towns, rural areas. So we are pushing very hard to say greater broadband access all across America, and we are pushing hard on that issue. I have only a couple of minutes remaining, so I think we have Jeff back on. So, Jeff?
Well, it really is interesting. I follow up on what Ray was talking about. As you're discussing the growth of people coming to rural areas. You know, West Virginia, you have to remember, is a state where the largest town is about 50,000 people. You know, very rural, and broadband is such an issue in our state. I'm also a county commissioner, and we just completed a $100,000 broadband study in our small county, trying to figure out how to get broadband to areas that are very developable. We feel like, you know, it's just like the announcement of the Loop project, that is the potential of the Loop project that would impact part of our state. People can work from home, as you've been discussing, but they have to be able to communicate. And it has such an impact on growth and property values in our state. And that is something that, you know, hopefully through some of the money that's coming from the federal government right now, a great deal of that will be put into broadening our broadband services.
Yeah, we're going to push extra hard, and I'm glad that I'm getting direct feedback from West Virginia to relay to our people in the advocacy team.
Well, your economic forecasts are valuable. I just want you to know that. Sometimes you may not realize that it impacts people all over the country, and I appreciate your work and your efforts.
Great, thank you.
Well, Dr. Yun, we know we've kept you over your scheduled time with us, so thank you so much again for your time today and for your wisdom and for the inspiration that you've given us, and hope that we believe that we'll land on our feet, as we always do in West Virginia. So thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. We hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, and have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you very much. While Dr. Yun is off, I'm going to pull some more folks over. Ray and Jeff, if you guys want to take over while I pull some over, Jerry Ford and some other of our people over for today, the follow-up of today. Jeff.
I would just say, I know you are a mess right now after being in telecommunication with one of your heroes there.
It's a true story. I'm not even going to be shy about it.
He is a brilliant fellow, that's for sure. So I just want you to take a minute. You know, you're a little flush right now.
I'm a little flush. It's possible. Right. I think I've pulled everybody over that we still have with us for any follow-up. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Mark's not here. Yeah.
Okay. All right, Jerry, I'll go ahead and start with you if you want to take the lead. Just give us an update about what's going on. Then since the way they're appearing on my screen is Jerry, Mark Slotnick, David Hauser, that's the order I'll use.
Not a lot from me today. I didn't prepare anything officially due to the presentation. Pretty much business as normal. Still a really weird year. Still have not met in person with the rules committee, just emailing back and forth and making changes here and there. So really there's not a lot of new stuff going on from our last report, but I'm happy to take questions.
Well, I'll give you one. I think you and Hauser need a shave. You know, send you a razor.
Hey, this is my vacation beard. I was on vacation last week.
Can you tell us a little more now that you guys have met and made a decision about what continuing education is going to look like? Could you update us a little bit on that?
I can. We did meet last week as a commission, and we did talk about distance education, and it is going to be allowed next year and probably now and forever. But there's going to be some certification things. I believe that NEDCA sent out something last week to all the educators. And basically, it's just a RELO certification process that has to be gone through. And once that's done, the remote education will continue.
Do you know what? I did get that email, but I haven't had time. I changed my background. People were asking me where I was. I'm up at the the Weirton board today. But can you give us an idea of what some of that certification entails? If you know, if not, I mean, I can look it up. I just wasn't sure, and I haven't had a chance to look yet.
It's basically, and I'm reading from notes here, so I may be a little off, but it's basically a course review fee for the synchronous education courses. And it's going to be somewhat less, approximately half than what the other courses are. And it's all going to be for RELO certification. It'll be separate from the requirements from synchronous courses, since these are asynchronous courses. And there is a price list that's out. I don't know if NECA shared that or not. I didn't review her email yet. But it's basically just making sure that everything that's done via Zoom or any of the other platform like Teams or anything like that meet the same standards as all the other education.
So it's more along the lines, if I have looked at the old stuff, so it's more along the lines of making sure that the delivery works. So when you
Absolutely.
click
Yep.
you click that, it works. Okay.
Yep. That's basically it.
Was there any discussion, you and I talked about this, but I didn't know if it could make it on the agenda, about looking at some of the already Arello approved NAR designation stuff that's out there?
We did talk briefly about that. And I think you and I mentioned that some of the hours were off a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
An 8-hour course instead of a 7, or a 4 instead of a 3. And those courses will be fine, but we will only give the 3-hour credit or the 7-hour credit. But yes, we did talk about that, and I don't recall anyone bringing up any red flags. It shouldn't be an issue.
So it'll just be a sort of, if somebody takes one, then they can submit it for approval. Is that how it'll work?
Yes.
Okay, great. That's good news. Thank you. Anything else? Or if anybody has any questions for Jerry, pop them in. And while we're waiting to see if we have any questions, Mark, I'll go ahead and toss you the mic. Oh, sorry. I unmuted you and you muted yourself back. Wait a minute. Now I can't do it. Amy, can you? There we go.
Okay, there we go. I'm used to running these things. I'm not used to being the other side. So a couple things. One is just some general things. Early voting starts today, so make sure you get out there and vote. Don't go vote today though, because the lines are extremely long. So pick an off time to go vote. Just the reason I mentioned that is just keep in mind, if you need things from clerk's offices, they are involved in the election right now. So you may find it takes a little bit longer to get things from the clerk's offices. So just be aware of that. Kanawha County's not particularly had that problem, but I know they're trying to pull workers from everywhere that they can because of the early voting going on. So be aware of that. The other thing is just thank all the realtors out there, because you all are preparing your clients well for coming into our offices. So they're doing a great job making sure clients know what they need to do. We're getting about 50% realtors coming into our offices, which is fine. Just make sure that wherever you do closings with, just check to see what their protocols are, because I know the protocols are different all across the country, all across the state. I know, I'll let David speak to this, but I know our lenders are running a little bit behind, not specifically David's company, but we're seeing a lot more delays in getting to closing lately. So like I said, I try to explain when I have upset buyers and realtors, we can't get things closed. It says it's all the lenders, they're struggling a little bit and they're very busy and their underwriters are behind, and they're doing the best that they can. And just have to realize the market is fortunately, as our guest had spoken about, overwhelming. So that's what we're finding. We're generally not having problem keeping up, but we are finding some of our lenders are falling a bit behind. The only other thing I mentioned the last time, we were talking about RON and RIN, because I love talking about those things. We expect that what we call remote ink signed notary will disappear at some point in time next year, because Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac does not like it. So I have been in conversations with my trade association, Alta. The Secretary of State wanted it to continue here because they asked me about legislation concerning that. However, I had a conversation with American Land Title Association, and they said they do not expect that the GSEs are going to be willing to continue with RIN, even though I kind of like it because I feel it's more personal. And we'll be heading towards what we call a RON scenario, which is very complicated from my end. I'm not sure I very much enjoy it, but we've been working on it here too. But right now you can't use RON here because we don't really have electronic recording. I think I talked quickly, and that's really all I have to report unless someone's got anything for me.
Okay, we'll watch that chat for you, and we'll let David, if you had to buy a second wheelbarrow now to help haul all the money that you guys are making, are you still using the same wheelbarrow?
Well, I tell you, it's been a very good year for us as lenders. As Mark mentioned, with that good year comes a lot of new complications, including staffing and being able to utilize technology to our advantage. But hiring new people has been a challenge, and hiring new people when you're buried in business is very difficult. So I appreciate Mark and all he does for us, as well as all the attorneys we work with. But what he's saying is very true, and yes, we've experienced slowdowns, and yes, we've experienced delays, and we have essentially, in some cases, doubled up on what we normally are experiencing. So the amount of volume that's going through the pipe right now across the country is just tremendous. Obviously, we're very fortunate to be in the position that we're in the real estate finance or in the real estate business, regarding whichever end of the spectrum you're on. So, but huge kudos to you, Ray, and to Angela Mayfield and Amy. You did a great job of bringing Dr. Yun on. I think that's a tremendous, valuable resource for everybody on this call that you should be paying attention to. I know he puts out good information all the time. I read a lot of his stuff, so it was interesting to hear him speak. A couple of things that's going on in the broader world. The FHFA announced yesterday, Kathy Kraninger, the head of the CFPB, or the director of the CFPB, did announce the extension of the QM patch. A lot of you may not understand what that means, but out of the financial crisis, there was some regulatory issues put on us that said we can only, we can have to lend within certain parameters according to the customer's ability to repay loans. Well, that patch, which gives us the ability to exceed those parameters, expires on my birthday, January 10, 2021. And Kathy Kraninger announced yesterday that they're going to extend that. And what that means is, for a lot of our customers, if their debt ratio would have exceeded 43%, total debt ratio, in other words, their total housing expense or total liabilities exceeded 43%, they would have not been eligible for a mortgage. And that would have affected about 1 million mortgages across the country. That patch has been extended indefinitely. So we've crossed that hurdle as they work with Fannie and Freddie and GSEs to try to come up with some parameters. We have an open runway ahead of us. Also, Dr. Carson did announce yesterday at the MBA, the Mortgage Bankers Association conference, which is virtual this year, so I'm not there, that the forbearance applications were supposed to end October 31st and have been extended through December 31st for the FHA. So if you have customers out there that are seeking forbearance or they're having trouble making their payments, you might encourage them to still reach out to their servicer. We have seen a turnaround in forbearance numbers, so I think we're heading in the right direction as of right now. Obviously, the winter months may tell a different story, but for the FHA loans that are out there, they have extended that for those forbearance applications. And just to touch on Dr. Yun's comments, and I'll wrap this up. The work at home user, or what we call the Wahoo, or he said, work at home, work from home, what we call it work at home. It is a real thing. And so you've got a lot of people out there looking for properties that, as he said, maybe they want to buy something bigger and they want to expand. That's not always an option. The Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies has put out their study projections for next year, and they're looking at a $5 billion increase in renovation, rehab, and home improvement financing. So what he was talking about, the Home Depot CEO talking about 12% growth overall in household and gardening and home improvements, it's a real number. And it looks like there's a lot of people that are settling into a state like ours where it's safe, and they're going to be looking for homes that are bigger to accommodate their needs from working at home and whatnot. But obviously, we're not building a lot of homes in this state. So as you're looking at inventory, keep in mind that there are programs out there that allow people to take advantage of improving and expanding current housing stock as we have it. So that's all I really have. If you got any questions for me?
I've got two questions. I've got one for you, David, and I've got one for Mark, I think. The first question for you, and then I'll throw it back to Mark, is the question for you is, what's your split right now between refi and new mortgages? I'm just curious that business. And now Mark, once he gets done, we had a question in the group that asked what RON was. So if you could explain those acronyms after David gets done. Sure.
So right now we're about 85% purchase, and we are historically, since we opened in 2012, we've historically been about 93 to 95% purchase year in and year out. So we're running a little bit more refi than we normally do, but our focus has always been, the audience here, our real estate partners, and making sure that we're serving you first. So we haven't turned away refinance applications, but our focus continues to be purchase. And looking at next year, I think that's certainly going to be where the business is at. So that's our focus.
Okay, thank you. And Mark, I'll let you unmute yourself this time.
That got me. I have that problem too when I run these things. Like, and I muted my host one time, and he continued to speak. Anyway, so RON is called, the acronym means Remote Online Notary, and what that means is that technically, in the true sense of the word, there is no actual document. You click as a lot of people, if you've gotten a mortgage recently, you do a lot of e-sign, and you all do it with your contracts. So essentially, you are doing that, but then there is a notary involved. And they also click to notarize. And then you develop up an electronic document that can then be forwarded on to the clerk's office for recording. Ron is in particular the front end, and I ran through some of the training with Doc Verify early on in the year, just in case. And you've got to work on authentication. So generally you're sent a link and you have to go through all those sort of 5 credit type questions you get sometimes, where have you lived in the past 5 years? What was your first car? Those things that kind of show up that they get off of public records, and verify that you are who you are. And then you're able to then be admitted into the RON link. My personal opinion is it's very complicated and cumbersome at this point in time, and it does not excite me. Also, depending on the servicer, and I'm not actually sure, and David may speak to it as well, if I was handed something that had to be done by Ron, I have to actually insert the links where you would sign and where I would notarize, and it seemed to be time consuming. I assume there's some pass through of coding from the lenders, so there's a lot of coding that has to go on. So that's the remote online. The only way you can do it in West Virginia now, we do have a RON statute, but it's an in-person RON statute. So right now, without any changes, RON would go on within the office. So a buyer and a notary or an attorney would sit in the office and they would click together. And it has to be an they call it in-person RON, kind of odd. We'll probably look at legislation to just go ahead and prove it up January. I'm going to talk, Secretary of State and I have been talking about that issue. Then RIN, just to keep going, because I'm sure it's exciting, remote ink sign notary. So that's generally what I have been doing when I need to. So we get together, I send documents ahead of time or ask the buyer seller to print. And then I watch them and record the activity and verify their identification. And then they send the ink signed document back to me. And then I notarize it here in the office. For the lender, the GSEs and the lenders and stuff, they really actually don't know that we did it. It looks just like a regular closing, it's just ink signed. So that's how we began the year, trying to persuade our lenders that it's the same thing we've been doing all along. It's just done in a different format. There's another way also. I've done a couple that are across state lines. You do have to, if it's across state lines, you do have to have a different notary stamp. It's called a Commissioner of West Virginia, which I have obtained. So that's a little bit different. You can do the remote ink sign with your notary stamp here in West Virginia if the people are both here. If they're out of state, you got to do something else. And I also actually do them out of the country as well. We do it for an occasion. So it's been a nice convenience as long as it lasts. But as I said before, GSCs are not happy with the ink sign. So I expect that might disappear regardless of how much I like it.
All right, thank you. We'll go ahead. I'm going to, in a second here, I'm going to just hand off to Jeff and let him shut us down and close out the meeting. But I do want to remind everybody, at the risk of maybe getting some rotten fruit virtually pelted at me, if your business is as successful as most of the people that I talk to across the state are right now, versus anybody that operates in Pennsylvania and knows that their real estate industry was not deemed essential for the 2 or 3 months of their quarantine, and they're having a tough time recovering. And even in some other states where they made it essential, and they did so with a lot of provisions from the government about how you have to show property and how you have to do open houses, even though they made you essential. And none of that occurred in West Virginia, and Mark reminded me of it, since this is the day to go to the polls, to start going to the polls for early voting. The reason that your business numbers look like they do, and the reason that your business has been successful through the pandemic, and part of the reason is because you were deemed essential during that pandemic, because we went to the governor and asked him and made our case to make sure that you were deemed essential. So I'm going to, again, I only offer perspective on elections based on the real estate industry. And remember that the sitting governor, the Secretary of State, Mac Warner, that Mark mentioned, with, even though it's clunky, there's no question, issued executive orders so that we could notarize. And the Attorney General, Patrick Morrissey, is the guy that reviews all these executive and emergency orders and makes sure they fall within the constitutional requirements. And were it not for those three people, your book of business in our industry in West Virginia may have looked a lot different had there been a different governor in place that maybe wouldn't have viewed real estate as essential or not understood the importance of it. So again, I'm not going to talk about other issues, but as you go to the polls, keep in mind that the people that protected your industry and believed your industry valuable enough to deem essential so you could continue working were those three guys, along with a lot of other folks that I just mentioned. So I would be remiss in my duties if I didn't mention that to everybody every chance I get. Some of you have been on too many meetings with me and probably heard it too many times, but I mean, we can't say it enough that we are, that this industry was deemed essential because the governor understands the industry and appreciates what you do and knows what a vital link it is to the state economy. So with that, Jeff, I'll let you take us home.
Wow, so I'm the cleanup hitter today. Thank you to all. What a treat it was to have Lawrence Young on here. And know that, again, Amy was looking so forward to his attendance and all those that were, and that's not to diminish Jerry, David, or Mark. You guys were great too. Lawrence Young, he truly is a great mind in our industry. And it's a real treat to have him with us. You know, the other thing I will say to Amy and all that's on the call today is be safe. You know, safety first. One of the things when we get comfortable, and that's been the issue, it seems like, with this pandemic, is we were petrified in the beginning and scared to death of what was going to happen. None of us would have foreseen the success that we enjoyed through this pandemic. But once we get comfortable, and all of a sudden, here you go, something happens. To give you that point, my son, Donald, both tested positive last week for the COVID. Of course, not knowing that we're all together for Sunday dinner, and here you go. You know, a family full of addicts is exposed. So it's concerning, even though we're getting negative tests. The thing I look at our members is don't let your guard down. Continue to be safe. We've been given the opportunity to continue to work and take care of our clients, and we've all prospered during this time. But don't let your guard down. Be safe out there. Take care of yourself and your family and your clients. Good luck to you the rest of the year. Thank you for everyone that was on the call today.
All right. I hope everybody can hear me. I think I'm experiencing some weak internet. I don't know. Got another question. Oh, I guess they're all answered now. We just got some thanks. So again, thank you, everybody. We haven't set the date. Watch Facebook for our November update, but we will continue to do these on a monthly basis until we can all get back together again and do this stuff live and fist bump and shake hands and hug again. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see y'all next month.
Go vote.